Hey everyone, my name is James Lynch and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. I'll get to every single one of them. And a little bit later on the show, we're going to be joined by one of our favorites here on the program, Dave Hall, coming back to talk all things Vancouver Canucks and the offseason and all that. Lots of good insight from Dave. He writes for Canucks Army and does a great job not only with the Canucks, but also the Abbotsford Canucks. So we'll talk about that, obviously, with Abbotsford winning the Calder Cup about a month or so back. How are you guys doing? Really appreciate you tuning in. We're still getting news in the summer with the NHL, which is great. I think since the last time we recorded this, we had the schedule get released. There's a couple key games there. Lots to get into today. So again, if you guys have any questions, just post them in the chat. But like we normally do, this is hold on. Something's playing twice on here. There we go. Figured it out. Okay. Anyways, sorry, that was weird. I had the show on in the background. I was hearing myself talk, and I was kind of getting a little bit. Things were getting a little bit crazy here. But let me just bring up some stuff we got on the channel. Hold on one sec. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. I wanted to show you guys some stuff we got on the channel because obviously Fanatics Hockey, we got a lot of cool stuff for you guys. So lots of stuff from the offseason. Again, we talked about this last week as well, but we got the Nate Schmidt media call, obviously signing with Utah, Ryan Reeves. One of the benefits of subscribing to the Hockey on Fanatics View channel is that you're getting stuff from all different teams, which is great. So if you guys are looking for stuff from your favorite team, it's probably here. So as signings happen throughout the summer or trades or anything along those lines, you will see those interviews here. We did have one trade last week, which I'll get Dave's thoughts on. Bit of a surprising one. I was actually on a work trip last week, and when I landed, I saw the trade immediately, and that is the Canucks trading Dakota Joshua to Toronto Maple Leafs for a 4th-round pick. Bit of a surprise. We knew that the Canucks were trying to move cap room, I think, for a potential big trade. They're also in need of a second-line center. So I wasn't totally surprised from that standpoint, but I was surprised from the perspective of trading Joshua, who they just signed the summer before. And yes, he had a down year, but there's a number of reasons for that. He had some injuries. He obviously had the testicular cancer that happened at the last summer. So I figured they might have given him another shot. So I'm curious to get Dave's thoughts on that and many other things. Canucks been busy this summer, trading for Evander Kane, re-signing Brock Besser, trading Arthur Seelov. So lots to get into with the Canucks, and we'll get into that too. We got our guy Billy here. What's up? How are you doing, Billy? How are you feeling about the St. Louis Blues in the offseason? The Athletic had a really good article kind of talking about teams that have improved the most this season. And I think the Blues, I can't remember if they ended up improving or not. Maybe I'll find that list right now. But because they were just basing it off of the moves that teams made in the offseason, if they're better or not. Let me find that article here real quick and kind of look at that. I don't know. I can't find it right now. But, they basically talked about the signings of Bustad and Pierce Suter and talked about, whether or not they've improved or not. I think their rating actually went down, but I actually think they could be a little bit better because I don't think they lost much either. I'm going to try and see if I can find that article here. But in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Would love to hear from you. Where's this article? I read it. I was reading it on the plane last week, so it should be here somewhere. Let me just Google it. Probably easier. NHL team improve. Let's see if we can find it here. There we go. This is what I'm looking for. Which NHL teams improved the offseason, ranking the 32. So if you look at this list here, going behind the paywall here, they have the Sharks at number 1. Understandable, because the Sharks did bring in a lot of people, maybe even overpaid for some people like Jeff Skinner and what was the other one? The center they signed, Mikael Granlund, paid a little bit. Granlund was Anaheim, not San Jose. But San Jose came at number 1. I think the Blues, they had them a bit lower. Let me actually look for St. Louis. Yeah, they came at number 20. So they apparently went down a notch, but I don't know. This is all based on past stats and everything. I think the Blues did improve a little bit. I think part of it was that the Athletics very high on Zach Bolduc, who they traded. So maybe there's some thinking that the people they brought in didn't necessarily add up to that. But I like the Suter and Bustad signings, especially for center, which is a position that a lot of teams are looking for right now. Blooms seem to have made some good changes, but I got to say, I agree that they kind of had some crazy momentum at the end of last season. Not sure they recreate that. Yeah, this is something you and I have talked about over the last week a little bit. Can the Blues keep it up? Maybe I'll get Dave's thoughts on this, but I think if there's a candidate to regress a little bit, it's St. Louis. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be a playoff team. It's just, because who knows how the West is going to shake out. I think Utah will be better this year. They might make the playoffs. San Jose is certainly going to be better, like this kind of list indicates. I don't think San Jose is a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to be bottom of the league, right? That's what I'm always curious about. What teams, and this of all years of teams wanting to be bad, this is the year you want to do it. Who's going to tank for Gavin McKenna? Right. So these are things we all have to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at the upcoming season. So those are some things to consider. Some of the other names on here, Montreal Canadiens, they got a plus rating of plus 23. This was based off trading for Noah Dobson, which, Dobson had a bit of a down year last year, right? So this is based off his overall career arc. But we'll see. I've seen some Islanders fans, and maybe we'll get Troy on here again here soon to get his thoughts on Noah Dobson. But I know there's some people who aren't that happy with the Noah Dobson trade. So there's that. Anaheim adding a bunch. Anaheim's a team, too, that I don't know if they're a playoff team, but they're certainly going to be a lot better. Kreider, Granlund, even Mrazek in net as a backup, I think, is not a bad option. Hurricanes will continue to be good. Where did the Canucks come? I think the Canucks ended up going down, but that's because – so here's why I don't agree with this model per se, is because – yes, I think Pius Suter had a career year last year. If you look at his overall stats, it's not something I think he'll be able to sustain as a player. So Evander Kane technically is worse in terms of what Kane can do on the ice. But the reason they brought Kane in is because they wanted some more physicality. They wanted, people to kind of stand up for themselves on the team. That was a big issue last year. And overall, yes, he's older, but Kane has had a way better career than Pius Suter is. So they're doing this at -2. I don't agree with that necessarily. I think Kane is an upgrade over Pius Suter, not in the sense of versatility, but in the sense of like all the other things he brings. So I don't necessarily agree with this list. So the Canucks get a -2 here. I don't know about that, but I understand it. Again, they're going off their criteria. Got to thank you for getting me into hockey more and more. My buddy and I had so much fun watching the playoffs last year, even with the Blues. Can't wait for next season. Well, I'm happy to do it. And I'm also happy to welcome on one of our favorites here on the program, Dave Hall. We've had him on a bunch of times. Actually I don't know if I've talked to Dave since I saw him at the Canucks game a little while back. I'll see if we can go down memory lane a little bit. Dave Hall from Canucks Army here on the program. Dave, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing today?
Doing awesome. I'm trying to remember if we've done this show since I saw you at that game. What was it, the Montreal Canadiens? What game did I see you at?
It was the Canadiens game. Yeah. And no, I don't think we have. No.
Mm-hmm. It's good to see you. It was brief. Canucks did not play well that game, but
no.
How's your summer gone? It's interesting because we think of obviously the NHL kind of not a ton of news going on right now, but I know from what I've seen on Canucks Army, you guys are still very busy. So how's your summer gone from that perspective?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're still pumping out right now. It's prospect rankings time. So, I've got my nose to the grindstone, but yeah, it was, to be honest, it's been a bit of a, It's been long. The Calder Cup ran until June 24th, and so I don't think I anticipated that, let alone anyone. So yeah, it was a late summer, and then obviously right into the draft, and then free agency. But so I took a couple days to kind of get my bearings in order, but now it's prospect rankings every day. So.
Yeah, no offseason, as they say. We haven't had a chance to talk, I don't think, since the Abbotsford Canucks won the Calder Cup. Just from your perspective, as someone who's covered this team extensively, how cool is it to be a part of that, to see them go on the run they did? Manny Malhotra, first year as coach. What was it like from your perspective to cover this team and see them go all the way and get it done?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. From everyone, from the organization to the fans, right? Like, it was just such a bad year with everything with Vancouver, so much drama, no playoffs, just so much negativity. And so for the Abbotsford Canucks to, kind of take that and just give the fans and the province of BC just a really good story to follow for a couple months, it was just really good to see on that level. But obviously as an organization as well, it just, it really helps for the first time in forever, this Abbotsford team or the affiliate team of the Vancouver Canucks has a couple players that could make that transition. And so, for these players to get that invaluable experience of going to a Calder Cup and winning the Calder Cup, it just bodes well for the organization as a whole as well. So just that you couldn't have asked for a better script, fan wise, organization wise, just a great story.
I know there's going to be some players that are looking for roster spots in the Canucks. We'll talk about that in a second, but I was a bit surprised with the turnover from the Calder Cup winning team to what we're seeing now. Obviously, one of the big ones was Arthur Silovs. We kind of knew that was going to happen with the logjam in net. But, to see some other, like Akito Hiroshi not, tenured an offer. They've had a number of other players leave. Did that surprise you a bit, or is that something you were expecting, that they were kind of turning the page on last season?
Yeah, I mean, there is an issue with the AHL right now where it's really gone towards, kind of hovered towards that developmental league where, which is not a bad thing, but at the same time, it's it is kind of cutting off that, that AHL veteran. So you got guys like Christian Wolanin, let's say, a 28, 29, 30-year-old defenseman who's very good, but he's going to command, quite a bit more money than a 23-year-old prospect trying to make a name for himself. And so because there's all these rules behind veteran rules and all that stuff, a lot of those guys, like, again, Christian Wolanin, are getting kind of pushed out of the league. And so while it sucks, and there are a few players that I'm a little surprised are gone, I wasn't particularly surprised that a lot of the bigger names, the older guys, moved on, because that's just unfortunately the way that the league has kind of gone right now. And the one name that I was surprised was Cole McWard. I've always, maybe I'm just at this point I'm just a little biased because I just like how Cole McWard plays. I've always thought that he could be a serviceable six-man at the NHL level, and he just never really got the chance in the playoffs. Once they kind of found their groove, they kind of rode with it, and he was the odd man out. And so, to see him on the move was kind of that one player, that 23, 24-year-old, that I was a little surprised. But the rest of them, I just kind of figured, unfortunately, that's just the turnover that happens in the American League.
Okay, settle this for me, because I had Stephen Ellis on last week from Daily Faceoff, and I want to get your thoughts too, just to really hammer this home to my boss Taylor. So when they traded Arthur Silovs, my boss Taylor, and Taylor, I hope you're watching this, said the Canucks got fleeced on that trade. Now, I figured the Canucks were going to get an offer back like that with the 4th round pick, and then obviously the prospect as well. I don't think a lot of people outside of our, I think outside of the Canucks bubble understand that AHL goalies just aren't a premium right now. Like, it's, we saw, Caden Primo, we've seen other goalies that if you haven't proven anything at the NHL level, it's not going to translate into a good package back. He was telling me, he's like, I'm surprised you didn't get a 2nd round pick. I was like, that's what John Gibson got. There's no way. So please, for the sanity of myself, because he made it sound like I was on an island here, that was a pretty good trade for the Canucks in terms of, obviously not an ideal scenario of having a goalie logjam, but they had to get rid of him. You got something for him. I think that was kind of the best case scenario with what they were sort of dealt with the goalie logjam.
Yeah, you nailed it. Like, it really, I mean, even Danil Tarasov, who is an AHL goalie, but he actually, he is an NHL goalie. He's been a backup for Columbus for quite some time. And so, he fetched the 5th, right? And so, yes, here in Abbotsford, here in BC, we watch Artur Silovs a lot, not even just the Calder Cup. He's a fan favorite. Everyone loves Artur Silovs, of course. And so because of that, I think, the hype, the personal attachment to him makes everyone think that he should have garnered a lot more. But the reality is he's unproven at the NHL level. And when he has been at the NHL level, with the exception of a pretty good, playoff run, he just hasn't really stepped up. And not saying he can't, I'm sure he will. There is a chance that the Canucks lose this trade by a mile, but at the same time, you can't just sit there with 2 premium NHL goalies and this one player who isn't quite good enough, but they think he is, and then they're going to lose him the waivers. So you're kind of pigeonholed into a spot where you have to trade him. And so the fact that they got a 4th, let alone a prospect who obviously, hasn't lived up to his hype, but at least a prospect nonetheless, the former 1st round pick who shouldn't have been a 1st round pick, but at least he's a player. So the fact that they even got a player thrown in, I think is a pretty big win in my opinion. And I think a 4th is just fantastic. Like you said, it's just the goalie market, let alone the AHL goalie market, is just a whole nother beast. So I think they did pretty good. I can see why people are upset about it. Like I said, there is the attachment to the player. But at the end of the day, he is just unproven at the NHL level.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, and to Taylor's defense here, my boss, he just thought he played so well in that playoff series, but I think what he didn't realize, and I was trying to explain this to him, is that the 10 games when he was with Vancouver, they couldn't trust him. That's why they sent him back down. People forget he was the starter at the beginning of last year. They lost that first game, and then ever since then, he just could never find his footing. And the thing with Silovs is, like, it's kind of a weird career for him because, he wins the World Championship with Latvia. He has the great playoff run, but there's just been so much inconsistency in between. We know he can play good in high pressure situations, but you have to get them there first to get to those situations too, where you play exceptionally well. So I hope he does well in Pittsburgh. Like, I think it could end up being one of those scenarios. It's just the Canucks doubled down on their 2 goalie tandem with Demko and Lankinen, and it makes sense from their perspective, where if you even have the possibility of getting like the old Demko, and if that means having another goalie filling in those games because they were overworking him, like look at Winnipeg with Hellebuck. That's sort of been what their issue is. I think that's the better strategy, because look how many teams have problems with goaltending. Go with the two goalie combo, even if you're spending $13 million or whatever whatever. I think that's the better scenario. Now, tying Abbotsford to the Canucks, there's a couple names we've heard, might make the roster this year. Atu Ratu, I think, is one that people are really going to be keeping an eye on. Linus Karlsson, maybe. Are there any other names, or are those sort of the two names you think that have a shot at making the roster this year? Is there anyone you think could surprise, maybe even?
Yeah, I think Atu Ratu is definitely that player that's, I don't want to say a lock, but I think just given their need at center, I think he's definitely a lock. So now that they've traded Joshua, I think that probably awards Linus Karlsson a spot. I do think Archdeep Baines is probably going to push. He'll be on the left side, Karlsson's on the right. So depending on how they want to go with that configuration, I think he's going to be the player that's probably going to, it's going to be between those players up front. Aside from that, you got guys like Ty Mueller, Max Sasson, who could, I probably shouldn't even bring up Ty Mueller. I don't think he's ready to make that full-time commitment, but he definitely will be a call-up option in my opinion. But I think Max Sasson is definitely someone who could challenge for that fourth center role, depending on what they do. Maybe they trade Bluger. We still don't know. Maybe they add a 2C. So if that's the case, then Max Sasson is probably on the outside looking in. But I think up front, those are probably the names to look for. And then on the back, I do think, while I ultimately think he plays more games in Abbotsford, I do think the Canucks are going to give Tom Verlander every opportunity to make the team out of camp. Is he ready? I don't know. Like I said, I actually do think he'll play more games in Abbotsford, but I do think they're going to give him every shot to prove me wrong and to prove everyone wrong and make that team. So I think he's going to be a name, and he's going to be battling with Victor Mancini. If he doesn't make it, I think Victor Mancini probably does. What he did in the Calder Cups was pretty phenomenal, especially in the early rounds. He tapered off a little bit by the end, just because he's kind of just went into his role, and maybe we were just used to it by that point. But in the early days of that Calder Cup run, Mancini was an absolute beast. So I think he's going to be pushing as well. So
Do you think any of those guys could be traded? You mentioned Mancini. I mean, we are sort of waiting, and the title of this video is like trading coming, because the Canucks are aggressively working to get a second line center or fill that role. It's interesting right now, too, at the time of recording this. I know Marco Rossi and the Wild are not close at all on contract. I don't know how the numbers would work, but do you get the sense? I know the Canucks are very reluctant to trade their prospects, but I don't see another way how they could acquire sort of a big name player without attaching one of those names. Do you get the sense that there could be some names on the table here for the Canucks?
Yeah, I think there has to be. As much as we don't want to admit it, I think it's a mistake to trade Verlander, but at the same time, it all really depends on the package you're getting. If we're talking about a Mason McTavish, then I think you move the world for him, and he's a guy that I just think you do
huge
whatever
upside.
you can. Yeah, huge upside. So you do what you can, but yeah, I think at this point everyone is on the table. I don't think there's a single player that you can really deem safe, in my opinion. So yeah, I think Verlander, Mancini, I think they're both definitely on that list.
What about Lekramaki? Because I think some of the thought was that if they didn't re-sign Brock Besser, there was even thought earlier last season that like bringing him up the way he was playing, that he could be a Brock Besser replacement. Well, they keep Besser, so now it gets a little bit more logjam there. Do you think he's in play potentially? I know there was always that weird stuff with Abbotsford where he had the good season and then he couldn't get playing time. It was kind of a weird end to the season, but he obviously holds high value being a first round pick, not first overall pick, obviously. But do you think he could be in play as well? Do you get that sense?
Yeah, like I said, if it's right, it's right. At this point, he's a goal scorer. I do think it's a big help for his development that Brock Besser is still here, because there's just a lot less pressure on him to become that. I still think there is probably some development that needs to happen. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if he's in Abbotsford again this year, at least to start, just to kind of regain that confidence. He went through a long year. That was by far the craziest year he's ever endured as a hockey player. He's never played that many games. We're talking like his first year of pro North America. We're talking Calder Cup playoffs where it's just getting hounded by players all the time. So it was a big year for him, and so I think it would be nice. It's nice for him to kind of step back and maybe just kind of reset on the season. And I do anticipate him to kind of bounce back here. But yeah, I think he has to be in play again. If you're looking for a centerman, I think everything. I mean, everyone's looking for a centerman. So you really have to push your chips on the table and just say, hey, here's our best offer, and it has to be better than the next guy. And I think Lekramaki is definitely a needle mover in that aspect. So
We got Dave Hall from Canucks Army on here, guys. If you have any questions, post them in the chat. We're talking all things Canucks. I don't know if I got your thoughts on this, or maybe I haven't read it yet, but the Evander Kane trade, it kind of came out of nowhere. Understandable from the perspective of he's got a year left. He's from Vancouver. I saw Irfan Gaffar talk about how he thinks, this is going to be a great fit for the Canucks, where he's a hometown guy. He loves being he loves being a Canuck. I know that's been sort of a talking point over the last year. Do players want to play here? You could see the thumbnail of this video. You can see how happy he is to play for the Canucks. Obviously played for the Vancouver Giants. What did you make of that trade? Because that kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't really expecting that.
It definitely came out of nowhere. Absolutely. The one thing about me lately is I've really taken I've learned to take their moves and kind of take a step back and try to think of what's next, because like the Dakota Joshua trade has took me not for a loop, but that's a
me
trade
too. I'll tell you a quick story. I was telling this actually before he hopped on here. So I was on a work thing last week to Boston. I look on the Leafs Twitter account. Dakota Joshua trade was like, where did this come from? I knew they were trying to move cap space, but I didn't expect it to maybe happen this quickly.
For a fourth round pick.
For a fourth round pick, exactly. And this was thought as one of the best contracts the year previously, because even Rick Dollywell reported that he was getting way more money on the open market, and he ended up staying with Vancouver. So.
Yeah, exactly. So when I see the Evander Kane coming in, my initial gut reaction is, oh boy, I hope this isn't a Brock Besser replacement. I hope that's not their thought process, because that's what made me nervous. That's the only reason why I didn't like it. He comes with some baggage, but whatever. He's still a serviceable top 9 player, right? So I don't mind it, but my issue was just, oh boy, I just hope he isn't a Brock Besser replacement. That's my only fear. But then once Brock Besser resigned, it's you could see it. And now that they trade Joshua, with Joshua, I'm trying to sit back and think forward. Like, there has to be one more move, right? It's cap space relief, because they think that Evander Kane can come in and replace some of Joshua's kind of nastiness, maybe score even a few more goals than Joshua did. So I think now, rather than being Brock Besser, I think they see Evander Kane as Dakota Joshua's replacement, which is fine. And so now it's just, what's the next move? Which I think we all can assume it's I think they're trying to get a 2C. So it's just one of those things that I've learned with this regime, that you just can't take the single trade for face value. You kind of have to think a little outside the box, because they're constantly working. Now, on the flip side, trading someone like Joshua, the only downside to that is that's yet another player that you've assumed, quote unquote, you've re-signed somewhat long term, and then you kick him out the door 1 year later, right? So that's not the greatest. That doesn't bode so well.
Happens a lot with this team, unfortunately.
It happens a lot.
Last Danton Heinen, Desharnais, they were just like, okay, we screwed this up, let's go trade them, right? So
yeah, and it's just not, especially when you're giving guys term, right, and promising them some security, and then just boom, see you later, and especially for a guy like Joshua, who is coming off
good locker room
cancer, he's coming off cancer, tough season, but it's just one bad season, and it's just see you later. So I don't know. It is a little bit of a cutthroat way to run things, but I guess that is what it is.
Yeah, that one disappointed me a little bit. I mean, I get it. Like you said, once Kane came in, he kind of does everything. He has the offensive upside. The one thing I am excited with Kane that was severely lacking last year, and I think you'll agree with me here, there was no pushback when Brock Besser got hit, Quinn Hughes got hit last year. We had that with Zadorov when he was obviously here, and he would stick up for his teammates. Kane will do that. There's also the downside to it, where Kane can be a little bit reckless and cause penalties, but I like that there's a little bit of pushback there. And to be honest, we didn't see a lot of that from Joshua last year either, and I think that was sort of expected. One last thing with Joshua I wanted to ask you, because there's this kind of theory out there. Do you think Joshua was more a push from Rick Tocchet, and maybe management wasn't as high on him? Because there's that theory too, that now that Tocchett's gone, they're kind of making their, it seemed like Tocchet had a lot of say on who was on the roster. Do you think that played into this at all?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got their guys, and Joshua is a Tocchet type player, so I think that's totally fair. And now that he's on the move, now they're going to cater it a little more to Adam Foote, and yeah, I think that's fine. But that might be Galaxy braining it a little bit. I think, really, I do think that it probably is, just because they're really just trying to get more cap space to make one more move to bring in a much needed C. So, but you never know. I think both come into play, in my opinion. So.
Now, there's obviously been the argument too about, you trade for Kane, but then you let Pierce Suter walk to St. Louis on a fairly reasonable contract. I'm a kind of the belief you got to switch some things up from last season. Like, yes, there was the health issues and the locker room stuff, but I think you can't come back with the same roster. So I don't mind that, but a lot more people outside of, I think, the Vancouver bubble were kind of criticizing them for bringing Kane in. Where do you sort of stand on that? Because I feel like Kane brings a different element that Suter could.
Yeah, I like I said earlier. Yeah, he's got some baggage, and so like especially when the original knee jerk reaction was yes, this is a pretty fragile team who came off a very one of the weirdest seasons you could imagine in terms of drama, and then you're bringing in a guy like Evander Kane who comes with his whole other plethora of package of whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it is a bit of a weird thing, but once you kind of look a little deeper, like he is a player, as you've alluded to already, like he is a player that brings a lot to the table. He can score goals. He's not gonna sit down or sit back and let people push EP around. And so I actually, the more that I think about it, I actually don't mind the trade at all. And he is on a contract here, so the hope is that he's going to be playing his guts out, and he's going to go out there and score 20 goals. Let's see how it works.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of question marks this season. Will Pettersson play better? Cheadle's health, obviously the Demko thing as well. So, this could go, I could see it going really bad. I could see it going really well, though. If everything really clicks, this was a team that was not that far off from the playoffs, considering everything that happened. And you're getting a full year of Marcus Pettersson. The defense last year was not stable whatsoever with Desharnais and so many other issues they had. And now to have that stability back there, I think it could be very interesting. Kind of looking at sort of the roster as a whole, we know they got the cap space right now. I think, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, or maybe you won't, but I think, you go out there, you spend that money on like a Jack Roslovic. That's got to be disappointing if you move Joshua out just to bring him in. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I would hope they're going big game hunting, or at least trying to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I do find it interesting that this Igor Chinakhov has become available. That's right. Some goal scoring. I know he's not a center, so that doesn't really help. But he's a name I'm kind of paying attention to. I think at this point, it almost just seems inevitable that Jack Roslovic's going to be signed. Is that a big deal? I don't know. Like, he's not a huge needle mover, but at least, you lose Pierce Suter, you're bringing in a guy like Jack Roslovic who doesn't do what Pierce Suter does, but at least he's a serviceable 3C. He'll do his thing. But yeah, like I said, I'm hoping that they're going even bigger game hunting and going for a guy like Mason McTavish. I know that you probably the package might be a little too much, and if that does involve an unprotected first for next year, let's say, I don't think you can do it. But I think if he is truly available, which I still find a little bit crazy, if a team like Anaheim is trading away a Mason McTavish, but if he's available, I think you move heaven and earth to get him on your team.
Yeah, I agree. He's someone, that would be at the top of the list, more so than Rossi, because the problem with Rossi is he's undersized, right? So it's like you already have a fairly small. Yeah, exactly. That too. Yeah. So there's a lot of question marks there. And again, Minnesota seemed pretty firm with the rumors that came out. Apparently the Canucks offered their pick and a prospect as well. And that wasn't even enough to get it done. And it's like, okay, well, why are we moving heaven and earth for that? Mason McTavish, though, I'm with you there. I totally agree with that. The draft this year, I think that's also surprised a lot of people. It almost seemed inevitable they were going to trade their pick. There was like a running joke for a while, and they ended up keeping it. And I thought they did fairly well at the draft from what I've been reading and seeing. You're the prospects guy. How did you grade their draft this year? How did you think they did?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to start off, give myself a pat on the back. I've been doing articles for months leading up to the thing, and everyone's all like, I don't even know why Dave's wasting his time. They're trading the pick, and I kept on pumping the brakes. Like, hold up, like they might not trade this pick. Yes, they might, but at the same time, like I'm not going to not write articles because they might trade the pick. And sure enough, it's a good thing I didn't, because they obviously kept it. But yeah, and I got my way. They drafted Braden Coots. I've been on the Braden Coots train for quite some time. I've been pumping his tires for a couple months here. I just think he just checks all the box that the Canucks needed, and you've got a guaranteed NHL player, in my opinion. They may have left a little bit of meat on the bone with a guy like Victor Eklund, who's got some offensive pedigree. He packs a punch, and he's a bit of a bulldog as well, despite being pretty small. But I just think with Braden Coots, you got a guy who's he's going to wear an A for you down the line. He's a rink rat. All he thinks about is hockey. He just wants to get better and better and better. I think there is some more offensive upside that's left on the table. I think this is going to be a really big year for him, and I just think you're guaranteed. You got a right shot center, which is if you look at the system, there's not only no centers, but there's no right shot centers. And so Brayden Coots, he slides in. Yes, he's not going to be a top line center, but we're also talking about a 15th overall pick, right? Like you're not in a bit of a shallower draft, right? So you were never going to get that top line player. Eklund could end up being that, but I just think with Brayden Coots, you're just guaranteed an NHL player who's just gonna do whatever he can to win for you.
Yeah, and obviously, if you live here in Vancouver, you've seen a bit of him playing for Seattle, so that'll be cool to check out. What about the goaltending pick? That surprised me a little bit, just because there is a lot of goaltending in the pipeline. But my understanding wasn't this sort of an Ian Clark recommendation as far as the pick? Yeah,
this was he. It sounds like he was banging his hand on the table, saying this. You got to go with him. And you know what? They do have a lot in the system, but at the same time, they haven't drafted a goalie in about 3 years, I believe, since Ty Young. And so yes, you got Ty Young. You like Ty Young. We don't know if he's going to make it. So it's always good to have that, the pipeline keep going, right? Like, I mean, if Medvedev hits, which everyone that I've talked to, it sounds like this kid is the real deal, right? And so if he does hit, we're still talking 6 years down the line, right? And so even when he was drafted, everyone's like, oh, that means Shelov's gone. And I was thinking like, okay, well, I still think Shelov's is gone, but at the same time, I don't think Medvedev has anything to do with that. We're talking like a 10-year gap in between the two players, right? Like it's, so I think it's always good to have that pipeline. And like you said, this is an Ian Clark pick. And from everyone that I've talked to, this kid is the real deal. He's going back to London. He's going to be the starter. That's a team that basically runs like a professional team. So at this point, you don't even have to rush him to Abbotsford at this point. He's signed his ELC, so we know he's not going to the NCAA. He's going to be in London. Let him stew there for 2 years. Let him be the guy. Hopefully win a Memorial Cup. And it sounds like he's a pretty exciting prospect.
Yeah, and it's the best case scenario because if my understanding was last year, like they had a starter and the starter sort of took over for part of the season, so get a full season out of them. London Knights, yeah, I went to school back east, and I used to see a lot of OHL games back in the day. The Ottawa 67s were like down the street from where I was living in Ottawa, so I got to see the Knights come into town. This was back in the day when they had like I think it was like Corey Perry and like Rob Schremp and like they had a stacked team back then, and it's just even since back then, it's always been run very well, like you said, very professionally. So you get a player coming out of that's always super, obviously a good program there for him to sort of thrive in there. So let's talk a bit about what you got coming up. We got the prospects camp, which they're doing in Penticton this year, right? So with everything that's coming up. So when does all that start for people who may be wondering?
They actually aren't in Penticton this year, unfortunately. The training camp is in Penticton again.
But that's right. I got
they got rid of Young Stars, and so now it'll be in Seattle. They still haven't announced the dates, although I'm anticipating it's going to be. They've already announced the dates for training camp, so it's typically the week before. So I'd say mid September. So I should be going to Seattle to cover that. I still haven't confirmed that yet, but I'm hoping to be over there. So it's an unfortunate, the Penticton, the Young Stars is just such a good product, and so for them to go into just a two game or a 2-team mini tournament is a little disappointing, but it is what it is. Seattle's a beautiful place, so that's fine. But then we got the World Junior Showcase, which starts later this week. So Brayden Coots will be there. Also, their 5th-round pick from this year, Wilson Bjork, he'll be there for Team Sweden. So there'll be a couple players to keep an eye on who are going to be vying for spots at this year's World Juniors. So yeah, there's a couple things on the horizon.
Are you covering that remotely, or are you actually going to the World Championship?
Yeah, it'll be remotely for me. Yeah.
But a little costly this time of year to go back because it's in Michigan, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So that's good. Back to the prospects thing. Do you think that's did the league push that? Or like who decides if that's going to happen? Because I wonder if that's like, I think for Seattle, just to get some interest, because they've kind of, I hate to say it, but since their inception, Seattle's kind of just been like, plain toast, so to speak. Like they're just, it's just very like kind of blah. It hasn't really made any noise. And granted, Vegas set the bar really high with when they came into expansion, but I just feel like there's no sizzle in Seattle right now.
No, I agree. I don't want to start. What I've heard is that it was a lot of this came from the Alberta teams. It just sounds like they were a little more unwilling to travel back to Penticton. Sounds like Winnipeg was. Anyways, I'm like, this is just what I've heard, kind of grapevine stuff. But I actually, it is good. I don't mind the fact that they've switched it and goes to Seattle, because you're right. They do need to kind of, they got to get something going, and it's nice to start a little bit of a rivalry with the Seattle Kraken. But it would just be nice, to invite some other teams. Maybe have maybe bring back San Jose and invite them up. Bring back Winnipeg over here, and I don't know. It just seems like a lost opportunity because it was just such a good product. You look at all the. Obviously, every team goes through a little prospect tournament, but the Young Stars just seemed a little bit more legit. I know the this sounds stupid, but they're wearing, official NHL jerseys. You're giving the kids, a sold out show in Penticton to kind of play in front of. And it just felt like it was a good product. And I mean, it was in Penticton, so you can't
everyone
beat
loves
that.
going to Penticton. Like who doesn't, especially this time of year. So you're going to attract more people. Nothing against Seattle, but I would think Penticton would be a bit more of a hotter ticket, although, Pacific Northwest that time of year is fairly nice out there too. What was I going to say before we go? So yeah, just before we kind of tie a bow on this, I think we're going to see a bit of movement maybe closer to the season as teams are kind of making decisions. It's a weird offseason, right? Because all these teams have cap space, but they don't have anywhere to spend it. And so teams are now having to like maneuver trades. And then you're seeing, some of the trades that we've seen are kind of either really low on the end of like a Joshua going to the Leafs, or they're really high for like a particular player. Do you anticipate more movement, maybe, preseason towards the start of the season type thing?
Yeah, like we said earlier, I think there probably has to be. I don't think you can go into the seasons completely satisfied with what the roster looks like right now. So I do anticipate some, but yeah, like you said, like it's hard to predict what that move is, just because you're right. Everyone has the money to spend, so no one has to move any players, and so and everyone wants NHL now players. So it's just a really weird time. Something's going to happen. It's probably just going to end up being, a Roslovic and, someone unsexy like that, maybe Robbie Fabry or something like that. But I do anticipate a couple more moves for sure. But I also do think they're in the mode where they would like to see what some of these younger guys in the system have, the RHD Paynes, the Sassons, and all that stuff. So, we'll see. They need a centerman. There's no questions asked. So whether that's Roslovic or someone a little more meaty, we'll see. But
well, to Canucks credit, every year they've picked like a bargain contract value. As Pius Suter a couple seasons ago, Kevin Lankinen last season. We'll see if they can work that here. If they, because they do a fairly good job on that end of kind of signing the players there. Before we go, if the Canucks end up making the playoffs this year, that means that another team's got to be out there. Do you see any teams in the West regressing this year? Two that I kind of have my eye on. LA, I think with some of the signings they made with Ken Holland I think they're going to be a little bit worse than last year. Not to mention they lost David Rittich and they brought in, I think it was a guy from Ottawa. What's his name? Or not? Was it Forsberg they brought in? I think is their back. I can't remember. Anyways, I kind of feel like the Kings might regress. And the other one, and I hate to say this to my good buddy Billy in the chat because he's a fan, I think the Blues will regress a little bit. I think last year they kind of had that Nashville magic of, the huge streak, and then, that kind of wears off a bit. I do like some of the moves they made in the offseason, but those are two I'm kind of keeping an eye on. Do you see any other teams that might be regressing next year and maybe won't make the playoffs?
No, in the West, I gotta say, as much as I hate to just piggyback off your answer, that's actually pretty good. Like I thought, LA, I think they surprised some people last year with how good they were. We knew that they weren't going to be a bottom team. Yeah, exactly. Like some of their players just went off, and I definitely think they're a candidate to regress a little bit. And St. Louis again, as well. Although they got some interesting players that I think LA's. I like the LA pick. I think that's a really good. I think they'll regress.
Well, what's crazy to me is they could have signed Gavrikov for whatever contract they did, and instead they get two older defensemen to kind of replace him, which I don't get. I mean, I know obviously Ken Holland has that relationship with CC in Edmonton, but I don't know. I just wonder why. I mean, I guess for everyone else, it's probably good news. We do got a quick question here from Billy. He says, what do you guys think of Kyrou still being on the trade market? If not the Blues, where could he fit in? Yeah, that's an interesting one to me. I don't know what they're going to do there. Because I wonder if they just look at last season and go, maybe we don't change anything, and they did add in some pieces. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a locker room thing, but I think it's a mistake to get rid of Kyrou. I think he's just on the cusp of butting into that star that you were hoping that he would turn into. So, like I said, I'm not super privy to what's going on in the depths of the locker room in St. Louis, but I don't know. Kyrou seems like a slam dunk to me to keep and to develop within your system, but.
Totally agree there. So do you get any time off this summer, Dave? You getting any time away with the family, or is it all business the rest of the summer?
Not really. I mean, obviously we have the prospect rankings and all that stuff. That takes up a lot of time. But I mean, at the same time, this year I have decided to, with that long Calder Cup run, typically at this point, I'm like super gung-ho to be doing this stuff because, there's
a bit of a burnout. You can say it because I wouldn't blame you. There was so much going on with that Abbotsford run, and I get it.
Yeah, the Abbotsford run, exactly. There was a lot with that. Not complaining. It was fantastic.
No, of course
super
not.
excited. And then it right into the draft, and then, so I have tried to enjoy it a little bit. I've kind of turned off Twitter a little bit or X, and just tried to just enjoy the summer a little bit. My boys play baseball, so just trying to enjoy it a little bit as much as I can, to be honest. I'm still, try to keep myself dialed in, but I was on a show yesterday and they asked me what I thought about the schedule that dropped for Vancouver, and I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't even looked at it right now. I'm trying to just focus on prospects and just enjoy a little bit of the sunshine.
Yeah, and I'll let you go enjoy that sunshine. Dave, thanks so much for doing this. Anything you got coming up for the Canucks Army that we can keep an eye on, please let us know before you get out of here.
Just keep on, prospect rankings. We're at number 7 today, so keep on plugging away with that. Blackfish will start back up in August, so that's my weekly prospect breakdown where I just kind of go over all things, everything, every single prospect that Canucks have to, anything that the Canucks have to offer in the prospect realm. So.
There we go. Dave, you're the best. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We'll get you on probably start a season, and have a good one, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
There we go. Dave Hall of Canucks Army, one of our favorites here on the show. It has a bit of everything, right? And this is why I like getting Dave on, because he's got the Abbotsford perspective, and that's very relevant right now with Abbotsford winning the Calder Cup, and obviously some Canucks talk as well. And looks like we're in agreement with a lot of things. So it looks like I've done my homework a little bit, because Dave and I are agreeing on a lot of things when it comes to Canucks and where they could go. So it's going to be a very interesting season. But I've said this time and time again, the Canucks, if they want any success this year, it's got to come from Elias Pettersson. He's got to get back to form, and everything we're kind of hearing in the offseason, he's golfing with Quinn Hughes and Thatcher Demko. Seems like there's some good chemistry there. The locker room stuff, hopefully behind them. And, hopefully he's injury free. And at all accounts, Rick Dhaliwal again, maybe a couple of weeks ago. By the way, if you're not following Rick, really good stuff there on Twitter, Rick Dhaliwal, insider for the Canucks, mentioning that apparently he's healthy, everything's good to go. Because there was that thought that he wasn't healthy last year. Remember, we heard rumblings about it. It wasn't an effort thing because he was still playing well defensively last year. He just didn't have that pop last year when it came to the offense. And, we even saw in the Four Nations, like he's icing his knee, like something was up last year, the tendonitis or whatever you want to call it, that Pettersson was dealing with. So, there's some hope that he does get back to that 100-point player. And if he doesn't, that's going to really impact the entire season, because they need a game changer. When you trade JT Miller, there's a big hole there, right? And that's a hole they've been trying to fill ever since they traded JT Miller. But, people talk about the direction of the team. They had to get some stability on defense. So I'm not as harsh on the Miller trade as a lot of other people are here in Vancouver, because, again, the defense was always a liability. It was a liability all of last season. Like there was not, as much as Talkett tried to preach defensive structure, there were holes last year. And this year, I think you're going to see, the Canucks have probably one of the best defensive stables in the league right now. When you add Pettersson in there, you got Hronek, you got Hughes, Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, fit in really well. We'll see if he can have a good second season here. So I think there's a lot of optimism there in Vancouver, and we'll have to kind of keep tabs on that. Okay, let's look at some NHL news before we wrap things up. Again, guys, really appreciate you guys tuning in here. And if you do have any questions, please let me know. What do we have as far as some news going on? Not a whole lot right now. Obviously there's some rumors about Erik Karlsson. Apparently the Carolina Hurricanes are interested in Erik Karlsson. There's got to be salary retained on that. So let's look at this tweet right now. We can kind of get into this. I guess the Carolina Hurricanes not done. Although Hurricanes, I think, have some cap room. Let's maybe check that out as well. So Frank Saravalli, Erik Karlsson, if they could get him down to that range of 7.5 for 2 more seasons, I think there's a team that would certainly take a flyer. I think Carolina is one of those teams that spent time investigating. So I've said this before. I watched, Karlsson last year. He's lost a step for sure, but he does bring that leadership element. He's still obviously got a lot of good hockey IQ. Would be a nice addition there to the back end for Carolina. And I do believe they still, even with the Ehlers signing, have some cap space. So I'm going to quickly investigate that right now. So I don't know at the top of my head. I don't, as much as I love hockey and, cover so they got 10 million in cap space. So they could afford this. So, is Erik Karlsson the answer? Is he an upgrade over Brent Burns, who they let go and didn't feel like he could, work out there? So yeah, because if you're kind of looking at this defensive core, Keandre Miller, as much as that was a good trade for Carolina, I think there is still some questions there. Will he fit into the system? Will he thrive? There's some questions about that. Jacob Slavin obviously is, their anchor there. You got Sean Walker, Shane Godsphere, Jalen Chatfield, Mike Riley. So it does get a little bit thinner as you go down. Bringing Karlsson in would certainly add some stability. And you look at the pairings right now, which we'll do at this moment. Got to shout out Daily Faceoff. They always do a great job with getting the line combos down. If you're looking at this here on the back end, Slavin and Walker, Keandre Miller and Jalen Chatfield, that's a question mark. It is. And then Niskanen and Godsphere. If they bring in Karlsson, then someone else is going the other way as far as their defensive pairings, but pretty solid team overall. The one thing with Carolina, though, is Do they have a superstar? Is Ehlers going to be that guy? That's the big question mark. The whole thing with him going and leaving Winnipeg was that he wanted to be the man, and he couldn't be the man in Winnipeg because they had other guys that sort of fit that role. So can he elevate his game? Can he get better? He's going to have every opportunity to do so. Very interested to see how Carolina does this season. We got a casual question here. What is the controversy and baggage with Evander Kane? I noticed he didn't shake hands with Florida after the final. I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. So Evander Kane, if you go Google it, every team he's been on previous, except for Edmonton, which was his last team that he was on, he's had issues, right? There was issues in, I think even back to Atlanta when he played for Atlanta. This was how long Evander Kane's been in the league. Issues with Atlanta. There was issues with Winnipeg of him not wanting to play there. He goes to Buffalo. There were some problems there. And then there's obviously the gambling stuff. You can Google this, like Evander Kane. There was some gambling stuff. He owed a casino a bunch of money. He had a gambling problem. And this is not alleged. This is fully out there. So I'm not talking any smack on Evander Kane. And again, I hope Kane does well. It's not me kind of looking back there. I'm just kind of talking about the facts of everything. And then there was the whole situation with his divorce from his now ex-wife. And there's a lot of back and forth with that. There's some allegations about abuse and all that. So yeah, that's where it comes from. But we got to remember too, Kane's older. As far as I know, and even talking to people that cover the Oilers, and maybe this is a good chance to get Avery back on the show and kind of get his thoughts. But I haven't heard anything bad about Kane in Edmonton. In fact, I've heard the opposite, where he was doing stuff in the community and he was a good teammate and all that. So yes, the Florida shake hands thing, you would have liked to see him, be a little bit better about that. But you know what? People might not agree with me here. That's just how competitive he is. He's one of these guys that, brings that element of, almost like a JT Miller, like in a way of where like you have a bit of this attitude, and that could be good and it could be bad, but it can also inspire other teammates to have that emotion and all that. So we'll see how that kind of goes there. Yeah, keep the questions coming, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in here. This is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Let's look at some other news and see some things that we can talk about. What do you think of Vilmer Arkinson? I don't know a ton about him as far as like his profile and all that. So that's something I got to look into a little bit more. But yeah, definitely something I will be keeping an eye on in terms of like, his development and all that stuff. That's something that, yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't paid a ton of attention to him, but I hear a lot of good things from people that I've spoken to. Some other stuff going on in the league. Let's maybe look at the free agents that are remaining right now. I mean, it's slim pickings at this point to see who is still available right now. If we look at so we look at the 2025 free agents. This won't be doing this in order, but maybe it'll have like the, see, I want players that available. There we go. That's what we want. So yeah, these are some of the names. And we also got some RFAs on the board as well. Again, I did mention Marco Rossi. They still have not come to terms with Minnesota. He hasn't. Mason McTavish is an RFA as well. That's something to keep an eye on too. Could the Canucks? I mean, I agree with Dave. Like, you sell the farm to get Mason McTavish. I think there's so much potential. 22 years old, I believe. And just the upside on that, I think, would be totally worth it. But do the Canucks have a package that would be appealing? I mean, we talk about teams that have cap space. There's teams that have cap space, so they also have more assets than the Canucks do. So I don't know if that's something you can do. Sorry, you're not even looking at my screen right now. Let me get off here and you can see. So you got Mason McTavish, Gorgiev's still a UFA. I don't know if the team's going to take a flyer on him. Rosselvik, we mentioned there. Who else? Another name that could be linked to the Canucks is Jared McCann, former draft pick of the Canucks. Years ago, they traded him away. There's some talk that he might be out of Seattle. Maybe they could make a move there. So that's something to maybe keep an eye on. That could be one as well. Yeah, so you look at here, there's no real names that pop too much. There's a couple of veterans like Tyson Barrie that, obviously has bounced around after having a fairly long career with a couple teams like Colorado as one example, the Leafs as well. Max Pacioretty, is he going to keep playing? That's a big question. He could add something to a team that maybe needs a bit of a boost. Luke Hughes still isn't signed. Now, he's not offer sheet eligible, but that's one thing to keep an eye on with New Jersey. I haven't heard any, progress there. But yeah, sort of the big ones here, if you're looking at the list, obviously, are Jack Rosselvik as far as UFAs go. Oshie retired, I believe. And what was the other one? Oh, Capo Caco got re-signed. I saw the Kraken re-signed him. I think it was this morning. So yeah, a lot of interesting ones there. How far do I think Arkinson is? I haven't heard anything about him being like close to being, a roster, but I think another year or two maybe would be, a good indication of where he's going to fit. But, one of the things you got to give, as much as people in Vancouver want to crap on the regime, and that they certainly should not be immune to criticism. I mean, one of the things that keeps happening with this Canucks management group is they will, like Dave and I talked about, is that they will sign players, and if it doesn't work out, they'll immediately trade him. I mean, that's not good. If they've done that more times than, well, I shouldn't say more times than not, but there's been a lot of situations of guys that they signed that haven't worked out. I mean, we go down the list, right? Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, Daniel Sprong. I mean, Sprong was a very low buy thing, but Vinny Desharnais, Danton Heinen, Curtis Lazar, who just signed with Edmonton. That was one that didn't work out, and the Canucks traded him. So, and the problem with doing that is that guys are not going to want to sign here because they're like, are you going to trade me if I don't have a no trade clause? So there's a bit of worry there if that kind of happens. But I think that as far as players, sorry, what it's kind of getting to is that the Canucks have done a good job, in my opinion, of building up their prospect pool. Back when Jim Benning was running the Canucks, he kept trading away like top picks or prospects. I mean, the most notable prospect he traded away was the defenseman for Florida. Why am I drawing a blank on him right now? I'm going to find it right now. I don't know. My old age is coming into hand here. The defenseman for the Florida Panthers, Gustav Forsling, right? That's who I'm thinking of. So that was always a problem, and the farm team for Vancouver was never really that good. It was Gustav Forsling. I was right about that. They kept during the Benning era, they didn't have a good prospect pool. There weren't like a lot of high picks that they had. Some of the picks that they did have didn't really pan out. For example, Jake Virtanen was not a good pick. But it seems like with this regime, they've done a good job of developing prospects, bringing them along. We saw that with the Calder Cup win last year with Abbotsford, but also just the fact that you look at their defensive depth right now, it's great. And it's almost like a luxury for them right now, as is goaltending, right? I mean, the fact that they had to trade Seelovs is just a result of how many goaltending prospects they have there as well. Lynch on Life tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see. I think I've got time to do one tomorrow. I'll have to see. Let me just have a look. This is my other stream I do. I do a lot of other streams beside this hockey one, so those are ones to kind of keep in mind. I think I could maybe fit one in here. Yeah. I think we'll have time for one tomorrow. Just remind me in the Discord chat. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, guys. We'll probably wrap things up here pretty soon. Again, really good show here today, and we're going to be back on a regular schedule. I know this month has been kind of all over the place. We had the free agency show, and I think one of the weeks I was away, I did the backpacking thing, and then we did do a show last week, but I was also away last week too. It's been a crazy month since June. I've been doing a lot of traveling, but that is all going to be back to normal, which is great. Doesn't look like we have anything here, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in to the Fanatics View Hockey Show. I'll get another guest on here next week, and we'll kind of keep chugging along in the summer. Hopefully we'll have some more free agent signings to talk about here as the NHL season slowly creeps up to us. I was just looked at the schedule. I think preseason starts end of September. Training camp will open, I'm imagining, beginning of September around there. So lots of stuff as we're kind of moving along through the summer. Again, in the meantime, make sure you're checking out the Fanatics View channel. We are posting availabilities for, free agent signings and trades and all that. So that's something to sort of keep in mind. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I will talk to you next week. My name is James Lynch. You can follow me there at Lynch on Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys next week.